I don't know if you've heard Ally Bestucky, she's got her summary basically is that anytime empathy makes you validate a lie or leads you into affirming sin, leads you into supporting harmful policy, that's when empathy becomes toxic. I would affirm those three things. With modern day culture, the way it's impacted the church is made us do those three things, but it's also made us think a lot more passive with the truth and with love.
Bunch of video clips of people getting arrested. Some of them were illegal immigrants, some of them were legal immigrants. And the big thing I saw was a lot of legal immigrants were terrified. They didn't want to go to Target with their 4-year-old daughter because this ICE officer might come and kind of verbally assault me, or maybe I get arrested and have to be detained. And I couldn't find a Christian that could care. And they're blind to a lot of the people that in this country that were good citizens, that were immigrants. But it's more of just like that knee-jerk reaction, I feel like, when evangelicals see things that are these political hot topic issues, is to kind of celebrate the justice and then kind of turn a blind eye to the suffering.
All right, welcome to this debate. I'm with my friend Jonas, and Jonas and I grew up in the same church back in the day, and we are both committed Christians appealing to the same authority, and we are having a casual dialogue debate on the topic of empathy today. And so we have some contrasting views here that we want to bring out. And we know that other Christians are wrestling with some of these same issues, and we want to model what does it look like to have a productive discussion/debate around these things. So Jonas, I'm going to kick to you. I think you have a statement and maybe some things you want to share on the front end, and then we'll get into it.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you for having me and having this discussion. Like, this is something, it's already kind of on my heart in the background. And then when you reached out to me or I talked to you, it was like, oh yeah, I have, this would be awesome. And I think, your heart behind this as a discussion piece to kind of model what healthy discussions look like is,
and I want to affirm,
fantastic.
I appreciate you being willing to come on, because it's been very hard to find people. They'll message, but it's hard to find people to get on the phone. Jonas got on the phone and talked about things, and he's also willing to even get on a recorded call. So yeah, I appreciate you being here, man.
I enjoy talking, so it helps. But yeah, I mean, I just lead off with that kind of statement and then kind of share a few
Yeah.
thoughts, which is, I believe Christians should value empathy more in policy and culture war issues, um, which is kind of, the opposite of what we generally are thinking. It's like we see kind of the extreme um, misuse of empathy on kind of the political left. Um, but it's like at its core, and I've been thinking about this for honestly, for a couple of years, really. It's just like empathy really is at the core of this political split in America. Um, and I think it's being mishandled on one side and it's being neglected on the other side.
Hmm.
Um, and from my perspective, it's like Christians are perfectly positioned to be that bastion of what godly empathy looks like, and to be both the advocate for truth, but then also a safe haven for people. Um, and I think that's where the church has really missed the mark. And you know, I can kind of speak more if you have some thoughts, but it's I feel like the average. Actually, yeah, I'll let you kind of respond to
Yeah.
that first before kind of diving in more.
So just to clarify, just so we get the statement, you're saying that Christians should value empathy more when it comes to policy and kind of cultural issues of our day,
Yes.
right? So I think the contrast we would have is, I think, and maybe we can talk about terms here a little bit, but as we're saying that, we talk about the statement, I'm looking at that generally as the modern day church at large, modern Christian at large. So where you may have individuals that yeah, this person, maybe they don't have any empathy in their body, and we're looking at kind of more of a general statement. So yeah, I would take the converse of that and say that I actually think that it's a problem that we've over-indexed too much on empathy in the modern church, to the detriment, I should say, empathy without the correct pairing of other core values, including truth and love. And so I think that's where we can kind of flesh some of this out. I think that, I know you mentioned that the left has been abusing empathy, and so I think we can kind of find some common ground on that. And that I think your assertion is that the church, though, is just underusing it, not really using it. And so I guess like what I would say in terms of my opening response is like, yeah, I actually, again, I see that we've actually over-indexed so much where like the political left has kind of co-opted as much
Hmm.
as they can a Christian ethic when it comes to how they define love and kindness, and it's really embodied. I think it's been embodied by this term, this more modern concept of empathy, of like, hey, you need to feel. And when we say empathy, let me know like what you're thinking in terms of definition. But my definition for it, I think the accepted definition of it is like we need to feel what someone else feels, and we need to
Hmm.
we need to be able to put ourselves into their shoes, and that's going to make us a more empathetic, more understanding person. And and I think that's kind of the way empathy is kind of defined. So is that fair?
Yeah.
Is that a fair? Yeah. So
Mhm.
for me, I look at empathy and I'm like, hey, it's not inherently bad. It's not an inherently bad thing. It's also for me not necessarily an inherently good thing. I could kind of go that hey, if it's just that, then it could be. I'm more on the spectrum of like it's good. It should be good. Put it that way. But I guess my fundamental assertion is that it's it's because of when it's misplaced and when it's the leading value that's not appropriately checked,
Mhm.
it's actually detrimental. And that's where I see like the modern church has gone, influenced by the left. That's kind of
Mhm.
co-opted again like this Christian ethic and virtue around love, and they've kind of stripped out what is the biblical understanding of love, which to me there's two big components of that, and that's grace and
Mhm.
truth. They've kind of stripped out the truth part, and they're good with the
Mhm.
grace part, which we all should be high grace. But I guess my response back is that empathy seems to be like a cheapened down version of what Christians are ultimately called to, which is love. And
Mhm.
the left has really been able to use the kind of weaponized empathy in a way that has made Christians and everyone feel like, hey, if you're not leading with empathy, then you're not doing the Christ-like thing. And my response to
Mhm.
that would be like, hey, we should lead with love, absolutely.
Mhm.
But when we lead with empathy, it can take us down a path that leads us to sin. And so I don't know if you've
Mhm.
heard Ali Bestucky. She's got a lot to say about this, and she's written a book on this. But her summary basically is that anytime empathy makes you validate a lie or makes you or leads you into affirming sin
Mhm.
or leads you into supporting harmful policy, destructive policy, then that's when empathy becomes toxic and when it becomes
Mhm.
dangerous. And so my quick addition to that is that I would affirm those three things, that those three kind of criteria. But I would also say anytime that leading with empathy makes us too tolerant of sin, even
Mhm.
if we're not affirming sin, if we're just kind of tolerating it or accepting it by and large by passivity, I think that's also very dangerous. And that's where I see like with modern day culture, the way it's impacted the church, it has made
Mhm.
us do those three things. It's made a lot of us validate lies, affirm sin, and to support destructive policy. But it's also, at the very least, even if it hasn't made us do those three things that are more proactive, it's made us, I think, a lot more passive with the truth and
Mhm.
with love.
Yeah, I'll say a few things. Like I think that like and maybe the teaching and the kind of shepherding that some of these pastors are doing in kind of mainstream or maybe more kind of progressive in a sense leaning. Um, I guess it's like they must not be doing a good job even in their own spectrum, and I might even disagree with what they're doing because it's like the average I see, and maybe this is just my personal lived experience and kind of anecdotal evidence that like the average person that is um, not a Christian, maybe, or maybe they are, a Catholic or just a nominal Christian, or maybe they're agnostic or atheist, but they're just a good person. The good neighbor that loves people, want to be charitable, etc. They want to be empathetic. They want to be loving towards the injustice that they see in the world. It's like they kinda had to pick a side of a group of people. It's like how politics work. You draw a Venn diagram and try to, like, collect as many people as possible. And it's like, if most general good people, and there's no great person, just for the record. But you know what I mean? It's like they're having to pick the liberal atheistic worldview kind of intense extremism on the left because I don't see many voices that are actually reaching out with empathy on the political right, but specifically the evangelical political right. It's like when the evangelical political right has a voice, it's usually to call out nonsense, to honestly make fun of the things that they're seeing sometimes, um, talk about truth, talk about, good policies. And it's like, and some of those things are like, okay, I'm on board with like preaching the truth. Um, but it's like when the average kind of person wants to like follow and subscribe to an Instagram account, they're gonna be following left-leaning content because that's the content that actually cares when there's local issues that's happening. And, just as an example, it happened a lot in Charlotte, but even in, the Triangle area in North Carolina, I think, it happened across the country, but I'm closest to those
Yeah.
stories of, when ICE really was cracking down on illegal immigrants, and it was like, "Hey, mark your calendars. This Tuesday, they're coming in," and became this like huge thing. It was on social media, everything, and the fallout from that was this like, a bunch of video clips of people getting arrested, um, or just talked to in parking lots or whatever, and some of them were illegal immigrants, some of them were legal immigrants. And the big thing I saw was a lot of legal immigrants were terrified. They didn't want to go to Target with their 4-year-old daughter because they're thinking, "Oh my goodness, I might be, you know, you know, this ICE officer might come and kind of verbally assault me, or maybe I get arrested and have
Yeah.
to be detained for however long." And it seemed like no, I couldn't find a Christian that could care, that even saw it, that even knew it was happening, or all they were really doing is like, "Hip, hip, hooray," ICE is rounding up bad guys and illegal immigration, and this is such a problem in this country, and for this XYZ reason, and law has not been upheld, and so, yes, truth is prevailing, and whether it's, an illegal immigrant that's being harshly treated, but technically justice is being done,
Mm.
it's like they're not attending to the harsh treatment. They could really care less, and then they're blind to a lot of the people that in this country that were just good citizens that were immigrants that maybe are, not white or black, kind of the predominant race in this country, and then they're in fear. And so when I see like when I, maybe it's not even just like leading with empathy in terms of like communication of, from a doctrinal perspective, or from a pastor, but it's more of just like that knee jerk reaction. I feel like when
Mm.
evangelicals see things that are these political hot
Yeah.
topic issues, is to kind of celebrate the justice and then kind of turn a blind eye to the the suffering, whether that suffering is, you know because crimes were committed, or whether, you know say if someone's innocent.
So I would say this is actually a perfect issue to kind of
Mhm.
start with when it comes to immigration, because the reality that you just described, it's caused by toxic empathy. Like the root of
Mhm.
that, from my
Mhm.
perspective, is toxic empathy. Like, why are we in a position? How did we get to a position where legal immigrants who are legally here are scared that they might get stopped and they might get detained for a while because they might get caught up in the enforcement of illegal
Mhm.
immigration, right? And so the reality you just described, like I don't doubt that that exists, where there's people that are very cold to this issue, that are very cold
Yeah.
to that people maybe even being treated harshly sometimes. And I would say that I think like sometimes like it also depends on where you're getting like your news, and like what's actually
Yeah.
fully representative of a situation. But I can grant that there is a lot of harsh kind of language towards the illegal immigration and the enforcement of that regarding that. It goes back to, again, like the root cause of like, why is this happening? Why is this situation happening? I think is a perfect example of empathy that has led us to destructive policy that actually harms people. And so because in the past, and I think we talked about this before, how it's like, yeah, it's not necessarily those people's fault that they're here because it was confusing. It seemed like they were okay to be here, right? And so, yeah, like, but you know why that is? Because we were letting empathy run rampant and guide our policy, and that is a horrible way to run any organization, but especially to run a country, to run a civilization, is to let empathy be a guide. And so I hear you. Like I think like the Christian's heart should be one of compassion and one of love, and so not one that that relishes in harsh treatment of others. And so I want to affirm that, like your heart in that. I also want to say that like this is a really good example of, I think, why this issue is so important, and that we don't over-index on empathy, because it leads us to situations like this. It puts us in these kind of situations. And so even though like the bleeding heart, empathetic leftist, and also the non-leftist who may have just adopted that. And I think, again, back to my challenge to your statement, I think that's where we see a lot of the modern day church. That's why I say, like, we don't actually need more empathy. We need love. Here's the way I would put it. I think we need more love and less tolerance. So more Christian love, less tolerance. So less tolerance for untruths, for lies, less tolerance for sin, less tolerance for bad policy. And we need more love. And the loving thing to do, again, with high grace, doesn't mean you just do it with all truth and like your attitude is very harsh, like towards people, by the way. And I want to make a quick distinction, Jonah, because I also feel, Jonas, sorry, I want to make a quick distinction on, I also feel like there is a time and place for harsh sarcasm, humor, even demeaning, kind of derogatory towards ideas. Not necessarily towards people. I think that's where you can really start to cross lines, where you're demeaning towards a person. But I think there's actually something very appropriate and even like biblical about being harsh towards bad ideas and towards sinful ideas. And so where I think a lot of times Christians overcorrect is like they kind of feel they might feel like the pushback in the culture war from Christians on the right who are pretty derogatory towards certain ideas and beliefs. And I think that makes them feel uncomfortable. And I understand that too, because there's real people that sometimes find their identity in those beliefs. But I think,
and it's such, not to interrupt, but like it's such an important distinction of like, and I saw there was a Tucker Carlson clip that went viral where like he was on stage and then he was doing that kind of derogatory language toward the idea, and then he slipped in to like making fun of this woman that was speaking.
yes,
And
I
then
made a
the
video on
crowd
this.
actually booed him. And it was like, that crowd was probably mostly conservatives booing him.
Yeah.
And I was glad for the crowd to like keep him accountable. That's like, whoa.
I don't know if the crowd, I made a video on that. I don't think the crowd booed him, but the crowd reacted, and he realized, oh, like that was too far. That was too far. So yes, I think you can slip into that, but I think it's actually, here's what I would say. I think we're at a point, like an inflection point, not an inflection point, but we're at a point of the spectrum where we have indexed so far on grace without truth, I should say, indexed so far on empathy without true love, which includes truth, that that is the danger zone for us right now. And it doesn't mean that certain individuals are like, hey, they don't have an empathetic bone in their body. They don't have a true loving bone in their body, in the sense of like they're really good with truth, but they're not good with grace. Like the truth is high, but the grace is insufficient. That's a problem for those individuals. And we still need to be calling. It doesn't mean like, hey, we just totally abandon grace and totally abandon empathy. But I would say from the spectrum that we're in terms of like, where do we index? We need to actually index more on truth. We need to index more and be more like even aggressive in attacking the lies and the falsehoods and the clown world that we're in. So for instance, like it would have been unheard of even 10 years ago, at least definitely 15 years ago, for anyone to like even entertain the idea that a man could get pregnant. Like that would just, it's just laughable. It's absolutely laughable. And we've gotten to a point where there's so many Christians, I don't know how you would feel on this issue, but there's a lot of Christians at this point in day that they would say that like they would need to sit with that conversation, and they would need to like empathetically feel with someone on the other side of that. And a lot of times it prevents them even from being forthcoming with the truth. And that's where we get the pronouns and all this sort of stuff, right? That Christians have advocated for because they've indexed so high on empathy and abdicated truth. So I guess that's my I think that's where the crux of this debate comes in is what like I think we both affirm that Christians should be loving. For me, I hear the term, I hear like this kind of push towards empathy that I think can honestly be very dangerous. And I want to caution against empathy and really, more than anything, speak to people to be more courageous with truth in love. Truth in love.
And I guess like for me, like I think it's so critical that you have to do both in the same, like not maybe not every situation you can, perfectly give like the most merciful, graceful thing, but then also the truth. But it's like I think there's scriptural principles too. I was kind of researching a little bit before, and like I love the verse Matthew 23:23. You have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. And this idea of like justice, giving people what they deserve, and mercy, not giving someone what they deserve, which is different than grace, which is giving someone something that they don't deserve, but in a good way, a gift. It's like those things have to be kind of together. And and then there's also, from what you were talking about in terms of like policy change, there's also a big distinction between kind of rhetoric and the heart of a Christian in these matters and in these conversations in their offices, even in their church or friend groups, versus like what a policy would need to be enacted, and what like principles are being, you know, kind of conducted there. Because it's like there's no policies about how we like talk about someone, or it's like there's no policy to hug somebody. There's the policies usually are more on the side of truth and justice and consequences for behavior. And also it's like the most empathetic, loving thing to do is to do the policy that is in that person's best interest.
I think
I know
we're
you
agreed on that.
mentioned,
Just to
yeah.
kind of counterbalance that too, like when we see like the effects of leading with empathy, it leads us to policies like pro-choice, because we're so empathetic for, you've never been in that woman's shoes. You can't imagine what she's been through. You have to let her make that choice. Would I make that choice personally? No, I wouldn't make that choice personally, but we can't tell her that she can't kill her baby because we have to be empathetic. And that's a policy outcome.
There's no empathy for the baby in that situation.
And there isn't, right? But because we feel so much, and that's again, like when we index on empathy, it's like, yeah, you can make that argument. You're not empathetic towards the baby, but it's really easy to like, hey, I can't see the baby. I can see this woman. I can see the distress that she's in. I can see how passionate she is about her right to do this, and how much like this baby is going to destroy her life. I can see her. So I feel drawn to be empathetic there. But it leads us to that time of policy. It also leads us, like another example is, it leads us to the gender kind of mutilation, like for kids, like that, because we're so empathetic that we really feel what they feel, and they should be able to be kind of nurtured along this transitioning stuff. Like that's scary. That's scary policy. It leads us to, as we mentioned before, like the destructive, harmful policy on open borders. Like that's a policy decision that is informed by, again, trying to lead with empathy of like, oh, well, they don't want to be in their country anymore. They want to be in a better country. Yes. But it leads to, like, we've seen the effects of what open borders does. It does to our own country, the people who are already here, including the legal immigrants who are already here, as you mentioned before. And it's also harmful to the illegal ones ultimately too. Like when the buck stops there. So like these are examples. Yeah, I hear you that policy generally is about justice, like, and it's not so much
Right.
indexing on mercy, but that's the problem with empathy when it's left unchecked and when it's over indexed on, is that it leads us to actual policies that are really harmful.
It maybe we're coming at this from a little bit different perspective because it might be a little bit of like the church's role in government and in society. And it's kind of a little bit attached because it's like, something like abortion. Um, it's like, you know, I'm glad Christians are known for being, you know, pro-life and against abortion and wanting that policy, to they want to obliterate it, to end abortion completely. It's like I'm glad we're known for that, but it'd also be nice to known for like, man, these people take care of single mothers like no one else.
Agreed.
And man, there's not even a need for the government to even need to step in to, like, help these mothers out because, man, the church is just doing such a good job, and people are opening up their homes, and they're adopting like crazy, and whatever the thing is that, it would make the it would make the left not need to create their own solution for the empathy problem because 'cause they're concerned for the mothers, and the church is like, "Oh, no, we actually are covering the empathy. We're covering both." We're not just like, "No, you can't get abortion." And I know, and Christians, generally are very supportive of, even just from organizational money perspective, we are funding, programs, and there's stuff out there, but I mean, in a sense, I mean, they're still small in scope. It's like they're, um, and it's like and I know people do this all the time where, when they go to an abortion clinic and they stand outside and they pray and they maybe talk to mothers. I've seen both. I've seen the Christians that go out there and man, they just have open arms to love these women, to give them resources, to give them here's free diapers, here's you know, a breast pump, whatever the thing is. And also please do not go, inside like here's resources. I've also seen Christians be the one out there that are just like yelling and
Shouting, yeah,
man, we
yeah,
need to burn this place to the ground. and
yeah.
and
And I would
and my
say
heart goes out to
to
those people too, because I'm
yeah,
like, man, I hate this. This is
right.
evil. The gender mutilation. My goodness, like it's the level of diabolic evil that exists in the world is is crazy, and it should stir in our hearts this desire to like, you know, if we're in tune with God, well, God also hates evil and wickedness, and He'll punish
Yeah.
this. And so to have anger for things and to speak truthfully, absolutely, Christians need to do that. Um,
I would say that's why I think we're very aligned, Jonas, because the um the like that example you gave of the two different types of people maybe outside an abortion clinic,
mhm,
I think that's a great example of like, yeah, there is a like I think the one who's just shouting down and isn't giving any grace or support, that's not love. That's all truth,
mhm,
but it's not love. Whereas where I see actually the majority of pro-lifers that I know, I think it's the very fringe to be quite frank. But the majority of pro-lifers I know, they're pro-life throughout all of life. And
mhm,
if you've ever heard of a CareNet Pregnancy Resource Center, there's all sorts of pregnancy resource centers all throughout the country. I'm sure there's some in Charlotte in your area too. Um, but it's an incredible thing because it's like the antithesis. It's like what Planned Parenthood really should be. It's about
mhm.
helping a parent plan for being a parent,
Yeah.
and it's supporting them to be able to bring that baby into the world. If they need to make an adoption decision, it's supporting them in that, but it's also supporting them.
Mhm,
Hey, like you're not going to be left alone. Like other Christians in this community, whether it's your own family, even if you don't have family, like you'll be supported by a family here, and you can,
mhm,
like physically with resources, with money, with mentoring and parenting classes and financial classes, like all of this stuff. Like I think that is the model of like, hey, this is what love looks like. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to stand by the wayside
mhm.
and not say anything when you're going to make a very destructive decision or a sinful decision that hurts the heart of God to take your baby's life. I'm not going to just stand by and say, okay, well, I wouldn't do that, but I'm not in your shoes. That's the empathetic. That's like the toxic empathetic kind of
That's the
response. Yeah,
misused and
and
abused.
there's a lot of nominal Christians. We had 40 million plus Christians, professing Christians, in the last national election cycle that voted for that Democrat platform and agenda. And yeah, you could say they were voting against someone else, but in reality, they were still casting a vote towards a party platform that's a core tenet of that platform. Not to mention the other kind of destructive policies that we just went through a minute ago. And that's something that, again, in terms of, I think they justify it a lot of times with the empathetic heart that wants to see like a counterbalance of all these other competing issues. But it's a manifestation of this reality of when you lead with empathy, it's dangerous because it can lead you to make wrong decisions. And it can be a Trojan horse to validate lies, to affirm sin. And ultimately, and this is where I think it leads, especially in that voting example, it leads to policies that are destructive and that harm people.
And this may muddy the waters a little bit because it's more about like the Republican Party versus Christians, but it's like, I guess, like kind of circle back with, you are kind of premising that you feel like we're already leading too much with empathy and it's leading to disastrous consequences. But then it's like, but then why does that person who probably has more nuanced views on abortion than we would realize vote for a Democrat? Because they're the part of their heart that wants to address people and care for them. It's like, well, I have no, that part of my heart is not satisfied in voting for the right at all.
I think you're asking the exact question. I think the reason why they vote is because they justify it with empathy.
Yeah, and I guess my thought is like, if
in that way.
Christians were on the forefront of like, hey, you actually do have a place here in, let's say, the Republican Party, and we're going to show you how through real Christian love and
Yes.
empathy. You don't need to choose that side. That
You don't need
comes
to
with a
choose
whole
destructive
other
policies and all these antithetical, like antithetical to Christ. Yeah, I totally agree with you here. I think
I don't feel
yeah.
like Christians are, and maybe it's tricky. It's like I think sometimes Christians and Republicans, like as a Christian, maybe like this is a kind of a different topic, but it's like I think a lot of persecution that sometimes Christians are experiencing persecution. We're really just experiencing persecution because we're Republicans generally, versus like, or our policy issues on things versus us being like Christians. And it's like I think,
What do you mean by that? Do you have an example of that?
I guess like just like within the workplace, for example, it's like I think the general vibe that people have an understanding of like, Christians is not, oh man, they're just so empathetic. You know, they're leading to destructive policies. Like that's not the vibe. It's like, oh no, they're cold. They want to focus in on what's wrong about everybody else. Um, Judgmental, critical on these issues, no empathy. They're just like, nope, can't have that because that's not good for you. And and often it's like, yeah, we're right in those things, but it's like I don't, just from the very first kind of the main statement, it's like
Yeah.
I guess I just don't see the world seeing Christians as overly empathetic. Um,
Yeah. So
because if
it's
they
funny because
did, I
yeah.
think they would be like, "Oh man, like I'm not a Christian, but like I care about these." You know, they're more caring for these issues, and it stinks because it's like the left is like very smart to be able to be like, "Hey, you
Yes.
want empathy, man? We have it. Come on board." When deep down, it's not. It's the misplaced. It's not loving.
Yeah. Honestly,
But
I think what you just described, Jonas, I think that's the stereotype, and I think that maybe it was more understandable for that to be the stereotype back 30 years ago, even
Mhm,
when you had like more like Christians were known as being like more fundamentalist and
mhm,
um, yes, high on truth, but not again the grace was lacking. And do those Christians still exist? 100%, they still exist.
mhm,
And again, what I'm advocating for is that instead of empathy, we should actually be high on love, which means
mhm.
high grace. That's the part that may be missing from that stereotype, right? High grace, but also high truth. And where I think, like, again, that stereotype you mentioned, like, that's actually, I think, the outdated stereotype, um, or rooted in an outdated time, where
Hmm.
now you see like more and more Christians that because they've been so beaten down by that over the years, they become more passive. So even if they still hold to those certain truths, they're less vocal and standing for truth. And then more than that, I think so many Christians have been co-opted by the left, um, into the Trojan horse to support those things, to support actually destructive policy in the name of empathy, even in the name of this is the Christian thing to do. So I hear what you're saying. I think that has been the stereotype. I actually think those roles have switched, and like the actual, like if you look in a workplace today, the most critical people, the most chill people are usually, from my perspective, have been the Christians. They have the better sense of humor, like the Bible following Christians, I should say. Um,
Hmm.
Whereas the most critical people are actually the woke, the ones who are always looking for ways to like be able to point blame um, and you know basically point out their own victimhood or other people's victimhood. So I think it's kind of reversed in a lot of ways. But regardless, there's
Hmm.
elements of truth there. Like we're like with individuals, yes, there's some people who don't, they lack the grace and they're high on truth. But my I guess my challenge and the reason why I think this debate has been helpful is like if we're talking about Christianity at large, like where are we struggling these days?
Hmm.
If we look again, it's been a whole shift in the last like 30, 40 years towards progressivism in the church, where the church has embraced a lot of the progressive left's ideology. And I think my hypothesis is that empathy has been a Trojan horse for that. That they've
Hmm.
been attracted to that, and
Hmm.
it's caused people to be passive with the truth. Not only that, it's caused them to affirm lies, to affirm sin, and to support policies that are antithetical to Christ and
Hmm.
ultimately harmful to people. So and I know we kind of go
Yeah.
on some circles here, but I'm gonna like in the interest of time, I'm gonna give you like anything else you would say on this particular issue as to like the Christian culture at large, why we should actually index more on empathy.
I I like something that you said very early in the conversation, which is this idea like kind of the empathy is like this cheapened down secondhand version of love, but it's more of the empathy that this like Trojan horsed empathy. And I guess maybe this is not true, but it's like I think it might be reasonable to say that I don't think people want the cheapened down version of something. I think they
Mm-hmm.
want the best, whether
Agreed.
you're a Christian or not. And it's like I think it's so important for Christians in conversations with people to first address the heart of somebody, even at the heart, like specifically even the heart of somebody that is empathetic towards a situation where it's like, man, they're talking about,
Yeah.
man, did you see this thing? And you're like, yeah, I did see it. That's horrible. And they want to make this logical conclusion. Oh, therefore, I want this thing. And you're like, man, actually, you know what's really loving and empathetic towards them? Let me show you a better way. Let me show you the real,
Amen.
true version. That's not the second down, second cheapened down version,
Yeah.
and the real deal. And I think if we do that, to be all the city on the hill, the light, people are gonna be attracted towards that. And I guess maybe you said something earlier of, like, kind of, some of these issues, like, our understanding of what the political landscape is so determined by, like, our algorithms and the stuff that we see
Yeah.
and the different news
Yeah.
sources we follow where it's like, sometimes it's hard to get a full picture of kinda where the country's head is at. But, I guess, like, particularly with a figure like Trump right now as like the bastion of the Republican Party, um, and most you have a lot of Christians in support of Trump, and maybe that's a little bit of why you might see kind of this watered down version of empathy that's happening maybe within the church is that as this like knee jerk reaction, like, well, shoot, he's covering the truth in a sense, so we got to like make up for it.
And that
Um,
I think you hit on something very big there is like the extremes are not the answer. So like
Yeah.
to index all on truth without any grace is not the
Hmm.
answer. To index all on grace without any truth is not the answer. And this is where I think we're very much aligned. Is and that's why I would say, in terms of like the nature of this debate, I don't love the term empathy because I do think it's a stripped down, cheap version of love that's been weaponized, unfortunately. And there's not none of this always bad. It can be really good. I think emotional intelligence, by the way, is really good to feel, like to be able to understand what somebody's feeling. Really good. But to your point, like our model, the ultimate example of love, Jesus, he like if you see the way he graciously handled broken people, it
Hmm.
was unbelievable. Like the way that he served them, the way that he met them where they were. Like we should affirm that and aspire to that. But here's the difference, and this is where I think like the toxic empathy goes wrong. Is he didn't leave them there, and he didn't
Hmm.
just say, "Hey, like you're good. We accept you." Like a lot of times, like this is. I
Hmm.
know you're not using it this way, but it's usually expected that you need to accept people. If you want to be empathetic, accept them for who they are. That's not what Jesus did. Jesus
Hmm.
did meet them where they were, and he was at their level, and he was extremely gracious with broken. He wasn't actually very gracious. Back to the harsh language piece, he had a lot of harsh language for the pious and the proud and the people that weren't broken. He used a
Hmm.
lot of harsh language and even sarcasm and with them. We have other examples of other godly men using humor and stuff to attack those people and those ideas even. But Jesus was extremely gracious with the broken, but he also said, "Go and sin no more. Repent."
Hmm.
So he
Hmm.
didn't accept them for who they were. And I know this is something I think we both agree on. I would just say this is why it's really important for me that given where we are now, that we don't actually encourage like or try to index on empathy, but we index on a biblical understanding of love. And the piece of that, from my perspective, that's been missing the most. It doesn't mean like there's some people that need more grace too, but by and large, a piece of that that's been missing is the truth part. I'm gonna give you the final words here.
Yeah, I guess like my heart behind all this is that I just don't want Christians to be so afraid to be called woke that they lose their heart for people, and they're so unwilling or afraid to even like, well, I can't really like, I don't want to like say too much about the immigration stuff. I kind of just want to like silently kind of because if I say anything, maybe people will think I'm woke, and it's like this label against people, and it's like no, like the Bible says like Romans 12:15, like weep with those who weep, like and I was looking at it just like, Jeremiah in Limitations when he's like seeing the destruction. And it's like, this was a justice from the Lord. The people deserved this. The nation of Israel was deserving of this, but yet, um, you know, Limitations 3:48, my eyes flowed with rivers of tears because of the destruction of my people. Um, that there's this big heart for not just kind of broken people but like even when people are getting the consequences they deserve, there's still a sadness there. Jesus wept over the city when he knew that they were not accepting of the gospel. They're
Mm,
gonna
yeah,
the hardness of their heart, and it was a stumbling block for them. It's like these are sad things when we see um destruction in the world or injustice or these different issues, some of which, the country has caused the issues that then we're facing. And then where it's like there's secondary and tertiary issues that we're having to like deal with the consequences with. Even you said just like I'm glad you did address it, just kind of like the miscommunication and bad um,
yeah,
policies around immigration and stuff, where it's like, man, no wonder that person thought it was okay to take their family all the way,
right.
travel
But
1,000
again,
miles over
I
here
would say that
because
leading with
bad
empathy,
communication.
I would say that leading with empathy caused that and led to the problems that you're talking about too. But I want to affirm it. I think like when it comes down to it, like we're pretty much aligned
Mhm.
in what we want to see from Christians. We don't want to see them abdicating truth. I know that you're not the true wokies who like really want to
Yeah.
see destructive policy or want to affirm lies. Like you know the truth, and you also want to see Christians demonstrate love when it comes to grace as well too in their heart posture towards people.
And I want us, it's the classic thing, say what you're for and not what you're against. And, I think sometimes there is a place for just humor for sure, especially like in person, I think, but it's like sometimes that the online humor against woke ideas and even people and individuals, it's like it's a little bit of the kind of the echo chamber that we point at and say that it's wrong on that side, but then we have our own echo chamber. We're all making fun of liberals together. And it's like, guys, what are we doing? Like this, I don't think this is what we should be spending our time doing, and we should be out there loving people fully and truly on both sides, with both the empathy and the truth, versus just kind of, yeah, poking fun and calling out nonsense. It's like we need
Let
to
me
say,
let me
hey,
ask you this maybe as a
yeah,
final question to reflect on. Do you think that, because I hear this phrase again, this was a phrase for a long time in Christian circles of what are you for? Tell me what you're for, not just what you're against.
mhm,
Do you think that the church has been vocal enough on the evils that it's been against in recent history? Or do you think that we've been more passive there?
maybe I'll condemn the church and say, but they've been doing bad on both. They haven't really been saying 100% what they're against, and they haven't been really being potent with the truth.
Hmm.
And so it's this worst case scenario, honestly. Um,
Good critique, fair critique. We can do better at
so
both,
yeah.
dude.
Which takes a that takes for sure a deep understanding of scripture and like being bold, being
Yes.
courageous, um,
And
having the
checking
full
and
picture
checking
of
your heart. Like
things.
I think that's where we're both agreed. Like we should check our hearts. Our heart should be for the person. It should be
Mhm.
for like love of our enemies. And to your point, love also it means grace and it means truth.
Yeah.
But when our heart is actually in a, if we check our heart and it's in a bad spot, it actually wants to see someone else, you know, like harmed and not prosper. When we want to see justice without mercy or just harshness,
Mhm.
that's not a healthy thing. That's a sinful attitude too. So I think that's where we're both agreed as well too. Dude,
Is it
thanks for
true?
doing this. Thanks for
Yeah.
being here. This was such a
Thank
good
you.
opportunity to be able to discuss these things and hopefully helpful for other believers who are wrestling with this issue of empathy.
For sure. Thank you.
Thanks, man.